Let me just show you what they look like. For example, there's a line, and we just plot data. So there's this word, data. So what do you think data is? Right, so data is just information. It's info, or information. Short for information, right? Information. It's just stuff that we can gather with numbers. We can make a line plot. So for example, let's say we had, this is what you saw. You saw the numbers 3, 3, 3, then you saw a 4, then you saw maybe 2 5s, right? So we can plot that, right? We can say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. And how many 3's do we have? We have 3. So we can sometimes people put like a dot, or you can put an X, right? So here we have 3 for 3. Makes sense. And there was 1 for 4, and there was 2 for 5. Right? This is also called a dot plot. So let's go over a few things on this. The first thing, though, we need to know is, before we continue, is what is the mean? Or what is the average? That's abbreviation for average, right? So we use the average in school, right, for your grades. You get your average on your report card. It's also called the mean, but you'll learn that later. That's extra credit. I'll ask that extra credit question. So, the average is the mean, same thing. Okay, so let's say that let's go over average, right? So let's say you got, on a test, you got a 70, and then you got, you didn't really study, you got a 50, but then you studied really hard, tried your best, and you got 100. So to get the average, you're going to add all this up. So what do you think 100 plus 50 plus 70 is? Well, that's 220, right? Then you're going to divide it by the amount of grades you have. You have 3 grades, so you divide it by 3. So what do you think your average is? Well, your average would be about 73.3. So on the report card, it'll just be 73. So again, you add and divide by the amount. So let's try. And again, it's also called the mean or the average, and we use it in school. So what would this average be? Let's say that you took a test again, you got a 90, you did pretty good. Then you got another 90, right? Then you studied harder again, and you got 100, doing great. But then one day you didn't feel too good, and you got a 20. Wow. That will affect your grade, right? Well, what do you think your average is now? Well, if you add all this up, you would get 300. And then what do you do? Divide by 4, because there's 4 grades. And your average would be 75. All because of that 20. Right? Now you hope that your next grade will be a lot higher so you can bring that average up, right? Okay, so we're going to use fractions today to make our line plots. So let's say, for example, that people were measuring, let's say students were measuring rain. They were measuring the rain that was coming at different days, whatever. And let's just say that this is what they came up with. They came up with a 1/4 inch of rain a few times during the year. This is, right? And once they found 1/2 an inch of rain. And then maybe they did found 3/4 of an inch of rain. And then over here, but another 3/4, then another 3/4, then maybe another 1/2. So this is the measurements they came up with. Fractions. So if we look at the line plot, or the dot plot, which also is called, let's just make a line. We'll bring it up here more, right? So here's our line that we're going to use. And we only have 1/4. Here's a 1/4. Here's a 1/2. And here's 3/4. So how many quarters do they have? They have 1, 2, 3, 3 of them. So there's just 3. 1, 2, 3. Bring that up. See, I put 3 X's because there's 3 quarters. Again, some people could put dots. Put dots if you want. But let's just stick with X's for now. Each X represents 1, right? So how many halves? Let's cross out the quarters. So how many halves do we have? 3 also. 1, 2, 3. So let's get rid of the halves. And how many 3 quarters do we have? 3 also. It's all even today. There we go. We didn't miss anything. So there is our line plot or our dot plot. And now let's find the average. How can we find the average? Well, let's erase this and find out. Let's add everything we have. So we have 3 1/4. So it's 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. What's 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4? 3/4, right? So we got 3/4 here. Then we have 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. What is that? 1 1/2, right? 1 1/2. And then we have 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4. 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4. What do you think that is? Keep the denominator, it's 4, and then add the numerator. 9/4. 9/4. And by the way, 1 1/2, 2 times 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, so that could be 3/2. Right? Now, let's add this. What's 3/4 and 9/4? They have the same denominator. We can add that pretty quickly. That's 12/4, right? So let's bring it down here. So we have 12/4 plus 3/2. So we can cross multiply. We have a 24 over there. We have a 12 over here. We add on top and we multiply on the bottom, right? We've done this before. So we're going to have 36/8. And what is 36/8? Well, let's put it over here. 8 times 4 is 32. And what's left over? 4/8. Right? 4 4/8. But what is 4 4/8? It's 4 1/2, right? Because half of 8 is 4, so it's 4 1/2. So this whole thing, and I'm going to erase it, but you should rewind if you didn't understand. This whole thing we added together was 4 1/2. Right? So I'm going to put 4 1/2 right here. But to get the average, we need to know the amount we started with. How many did we start with? We started with 3, 6, 9. We started with 9. So this is the sum. And now we need to divide it by 9. Right? So let's divide 4 1/2 by 9. And 4 1/2, let's just bring it up here for a minute. 4 1/2 is also 9/2. Also 9/2, because 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Divided by 9. Always put the whole number over 1. Okay, now we should remember what we do with division. We keep, change, flip. Remember that? We're going to change division to multiplication. So that becomes multiplication. And then we do the reciprocal. 1/9. So we get 9/18, which is 1/2, or we can just cross out the 9 right away, and that's the average. The average is half. Let's say we had, again, they were measuring stuff. Whatever they were measuring, they came up with this. They came up with a 3/4, another 3/4, a 1/4, a 1/4, a 1/4, another 1/4, and a half. And then, let's move that over so you can see it. There we go. Then, here's one. They found 1 1/2. Must have been a rainy day out or whatever they were measuring. So see if you can get the sum, get the average, and then show me what it would look like on a line plot. So let's get the average first. Let's get the sum, right? So bring this down. Let's just make our line plot first. It's much easier. We should do that first. So we have a quarter. We have a half. We have 3/4. Right? But what is the last one? This is 1 1/2. It's bigger. It's greater. It's 3/2. I'll just put 1 1/2 for now. So how many 3/4 do we have? 2. Get rid of that. There's 2 right there. How many halves? 1. How many 1 1/2? 1. How many quarters? 4, right? Right, so there's our line plot. So let's add this up. What's 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 4/4 is 1. So far, we just have 1. Put it over here for now. That's the sum of 1. Plus a half, right? So then we have 1 1/2. So now we have 2 3/4. What's 3/4 plus 3/4? Bring this over here. So right now we have 1 1/2. Oh, what's 1 1/2 plus 1 1/2? That's 3. So far we have 3. The only thing left now is to find what 3/4 plus 3/4 is. Okay, so let's do that down here. 3/4 plus 3/4 is 6/4, which is 1 2/4. What's 1 2/4? It's 1 1/2, right? It's 1 1/2. And here's something to note about 1 1/2. 6/4 and 3/2 are equal. 2 times 6 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12, right? So we have another 1 1/2. We started, we got 3 plus a half. 1 1/2. So that's 4 1/2. Our sum is 4 1/2. The whole thing we did was 4 1/2. And then we just divide it by what? We divide it by the amount we had. Alright, so we have 4 1/2, and we're going to divide it by 8 because we had 8 numbers when we started. That's the sum divided by 8 to get the average, to get the mean. So the top number, the numerator, is always the first number we put when we divide. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, so this is 9/2, divided by 8/1. Right, so we'll take this out of the way. It's 8/1. And we're going to change this division to multiplication. So let's do it over here. 9/2 times, and then we do the reciprocal, we flip it. And then we just get 9/16. That is our average, 9/16. So again, with 4 1/2, 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. That's why it's 9/2. And let's bring that over so you see the average, 9/16. That's the average. All right, so we did line plots with averages today. Great job.